Spring Boot Dynamic Bean Initialization Explained. Imagine you're building a Spring Boot application. You have a payment service, a notification service, and an API client. Normally, Spring creates these beans automatically using annotations like @component, @service, or @bean. Everything works perfectly when the number of beans is fixed. But what happens when the number of beans depends on a configuration file, database records, or client settings? That's where dynamic bean initialization comes in. Let's understand this with a real-world example. Suppose you're building a multi-tenant application. Today you have 3 clients. Next month you may have 20. Creating separate bean classes for every client would be difficult to maintain. Instead, Spring can create beans dynamically during startup based on configuration values. No extra classes, no duplicate code, just smart bean creation. Think of Spring as a hotel manager. In a traditional setup, the manager prepares a fixed number of rooms before guests arrive. That's normal bean creation. With dynamic bean initialization, the manager first checks today's bookings and then prepares only the required rooms. More flexible, more efficient. So how does this work? When Spring Boot starts, it creates something called the application context. This context manages all beans in the application. It decides which beans should exist and how they should be created. Normally, Spring registers bean definitions found during component scanning, but developers can also register new bean definitions programmatically. This is called dynamic bean registration. One important tool used for this purpose is Bean Definition Registry Post-Processor. The name sounds complex, but the concept is simple. It allows developers to interact with Spring's bean registry before the application finishes starting. At this stage, new bean definitions can be added dynamically. Think of it as modifying a guest list before a big event begins. Another useful class is Bean Definition Builder. Instead of manually creating bean definitions, it provides a cleaner way to build them. You can configure properties, constructor arguments, and bean settings before registering them with Spring. This makes dynamic registration easier and more readable. Now let's look at a practical use case. Suppose your application connects to multiple external APIs. Each API has its own URL, API key, and configuration. Instead of writing separate classes for every API client, Spring can read the configuration and create all required beans automatically during startup. Add a new API configuration, restart the application, a new bean is created automatically. Dynamic bean initialization is commonly used in multi-tenant systems, database connector management, external API integrations, plugin architectures, feature toggle systems, enterprise frameworks. Whenever the number of components is not fixed, dynamic beans become extremely useful. Let's quickly compare. Traditional bean initialization, beans are defined manually. Number of beans is fixed. Code changes are often required. Dynamic bean initialization, beans are created programmatically. Configuration controls bean creation. Much more flexible and scalable. The biggest advantage is that your application becomes configuration-driven. Need 5 API clients? Update configuration. Need 20 API clients? Update configuration. No new Java classes. No repetitive code. No maintenance headaches. So remember this, Spring Boot is not limited to creating predefined beans. It can also create beans dynamically based on your application's requirements. And that's what makes dynamic bean initialization one of the most powerful advanced features in Spring Boot. Once you understand this concept, you'll start seeing Spring as much more than a framework.